When the human entered, everyone expected death, that the cub consumed from her hands. Part 1. The message came at the worst possible time. Ambassador Rail was sitting in his office on Veltanine, a large space station that floated between 3 different star systems. He was drinking his morning tea when his communication device made a sharp sound. He looked at the screen and nearly dropped his cup. Humans were coming. Rail was a Lunari, a species that looked like tall, thin creatures covered in soft gray fur. They had 4 eyes and long ears that could hear sounds from very far away. The Lunari were known as careful beings. They studied everything before making decisions. They avoided danger at all costs, and humans were the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Rail had never seen a human in person. Nobody on Veltanine had, but everyone knew the stories. Humans came from a planet called Earth, a world so violent that scientists called it a death world. The gravity there was crushing. The weather was extreme. Poisonous plants grew everywhere. Deadly animals hunted in every forest and ocean dot, and somehow humans had not only survived on this terrible planet, they had conquered it. The story said that humans could run for hours without stopping. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill any other species. They ate the flesh of dead animals, cooking it over fire like ancient savages. They had hunted the largest creatures on their planet until none were left. They fought wars against each other for thousands of years, developing weapons that could destroy entire cities. Even their smiles were threats. When a human showed its teeth, it was displaying the bones inside its mouth. A warning, a promise of violence. Rail read the message 3 more times. A human diplomatic ship was coming to Veltanine. They wanted to discuss trade agreements. They would arrive in 6 hours. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the station council. The council chamber was full of representatives from 12 different species. There were the Veth, tall insect-like beings with hard shells and clicking mandibles. There were the Morath, small creatures that floated in special water-filled suits. There were the Kel, the Ynnari, the Dross, and many others. All of them were afraid. "We should refuse them entry," said Delegate Oren of the Veth. His voice was sharp and mechanical. "Humans are predators. Allowing them on this station is inviting death." "We cannot refuse," Rail replied. His 4 eyes looked tired. "The Galactic Compact requires us to accept diplomatic envoys from any species that requests peaceful contact. If we refuse, we break the law. Then we arm ourselves," said another delegate. "We prepare for attack. If we attack them first, we start a war," Rail said. "A war we cannot win." The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was right. Humans were too strong, too fast, too resilient. Their ships were powerful. Their soldiers were fearless. Fighting them was not an option. "Then what do we do?" Oren asked. Rail took a deep breath. "We greet them. We give them what they want. And we pray they leave quickly." 6 hours later, the human ship arrived, that it was smaller than Rail expected. The vessel was simple and practical, painted in plain colors. It docked at the far end of the station, away from the main population areas. Rail had ordered this. He wanted the humans as far from his people as possible. He walked to the docking bay with 20 armed guards. His legs felt weak. His hearts were beating too fast. He had spent his whole life teaching others about the danger of humans. Now he would meet them face to face. The airlock opened with a hiss of air. 3 figures stepped out. The first was a female human. She was shorter than Rail expected, with black hair tied behind her head and warm brown eyes. She wore a simple uniform with no weapons visible. Her name, according to the ship's manifest, was Yuna. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life forms. Behind her were 2 more humans, a male named Tay and a female named Hana. They wore the uniforms of security officers, but they kept their hands away from their weapons. Their faces were calm. Una stepped forward and smiled. Rael flinched. He saw her teeth, white and straight and sharp. His guards raised their weapons slightly, but Una did not attack. She simply bowed her head in a gesture of respect. "Ambassador Rael," she said. Her voice was soft and warm. "Thank you for receiving us. We are honored to visit Veltanine." Rael did not know what to say. He had expected aggression. He had expected demands and threats. Instead, the human was polite, gentle, even. He forced himself to speak. "You are welcome. Please follow me." As they walked through the station, Rael noticed something strange. The corridors were empty. Completely empty. Normally, this area was full of merchants and travelers. Now there was nobody. He realized that everyone had fled. Word had spread that humans were on the station, and every being with any sense had hidden themselves away. Shops were closed. Doors were locked. Children had been taken to safe rooms deep inside the station's core. Una noticed too. She looked around at the empty hallways with a confused expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Is there an emergency?" Rael did not answer. He did not know how to explain that she was the emergency. He led the humans to a special section of the station. It was a quarantine zone, normally used for species that might carry dangerous diseases. The rooms were comfortable but isolated. The doors could be locked from the outside. "You will stay here," Rael said, "for your safety." Una looked at the bare walls and the sealed windows. She understood what this place was. A prison, dressed up as a guest room. But she did not argue. She simply nodded. "Thank you, Ambassador. We appreciate your hospitality." That night, Rael could not sleep. He lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The humans were on his station. They were breathing the same recycled air. They were only a few corridors away. He thought about Una's smile. It had looked so strange, so wrong. How could a threat display appear so gentle? He thought about her voice. It had been soft and careful. She had spoken like someone who did not want to frighten anyone. But that was impossible. Humans were monsters. Everyone knew this. The science was clear. The history was documented. They were predators from a world of death. Rael closed his eyes and tried to forget. Tomorrow, the negotiations would begin. He would give the humans whatever they wanted. And then they would leave. And life on Veltanine would return to normal. He did not know that everything was about to change. He did not know that somewhere on his station, a small orphan was crying alone in the dark. And he did not know that the human called Una was about to do something that would shake the foundations of everything that the galaxy believed. The night was quiet. But it would not stay quiet for long. When the human entered, everyone expected death, but the cub consumed from her hands part Twyana could not sleep. The bed in her room was too soft. The air smelled strange, like metal and chemicals. And the gravity was wrong. On Earth, gravity pulled at her body with a strong, familiar force. Here on Veltanine, she felt too light. Every movement was too easy. It made her feel dizzy. But the biggest problem was not the bed or the air or the gravity. The biggest problem was the fear she had seen in everyone's eyes. She had traveled across the stars to meet new species. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. She wanted to learn about alien cultures. She wanted to make friends with beings from other worlds. She wanted to show them that humans were not so different from anyone else. Instead, she had been locked in a quarantine zone like a dangerous animal. Una sat up in her bed. The room was dark and quiet. Tay and Hannah were sleeping in their own rooms nearby. They had told her not to worry. They said the aliens would warm up to them eventually. But Una had seen the way Ambassador Rael looked at her. like she was a monster, like she might attack at any moment. She got out of bed and walked to the window. It was sealed shut, but she could see through it. Outside was the blackness of space, filled with distant stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, her home, her family, everything she knew. She missed the feeling of rain on her face. She missed the smell of flowers in spring. She missed her mother's cooking and her father's bad jokes. But she had a job to do. She had to make this mission work. Yuna decided to take a walk. She knew she was supposed to stay in the quarantine zone, but the doors were not actually locked. Ambassador Rail had said they were for her safety, but she suspected they were really meant to keep her contained. Either way, she needed to clear her head. She stepped into the corridor. It was empty and silent. The lights were dim, set to a nighttime mode. Her footsteps echoed on the metal floor. She walked carefully, staying within the permitted area. She did not want to cause trouble. She just wanted to move, to think, to breathe. Then she heard something. It was a small sound, soft and broken. A whimper, like a child crying. Yuna stopped walking. She listened carefully. The sound came again. It was coming from somewhere below her, through the ventilation system. She followed the sound. It led her through a maze of corridors and down a set of stairs. She found herself in a part of the station she had not seen before. It was older and less clean. The lights flickered. Dust floated in the air. She reached a large cargo bay filled with old crates and forgotten equipment. The room was dark and cold. And there, in the corner, hidden behind a broken container, was the source of the crying. It was a Lunari cub. The child was tiny, no bigger than a human toddler. Its gray fur was dirty and tangled. Its large eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, filled with tears. It was shaking, pressing itself against the wall, trying to make itself as small as possible. Yuna's heart broke. She had studied the migrants, Lunari, before coming to Veltanine. She knew they were a careful species, protective of their young. Lunari children were precious to them. They were raised with love and attention for many years before becoming adults. So why was this child alone? Why was it hiding in a forgotten cargo bay, dirty and afraid? Yuna crouched down slowly. She made herself small. She did not want to frighten the cub any more than it already was. The child saw her and froze. Its eyes went wide with terror. It opened its mouth to scream, but no sound came out. It was too scared to even cry. Yuna understood. To this child, she was a nightmare come to life. She was a human, a predator from a death world. The cub had probably heard stories about her kind. Stories about monsters who ate flesh and smiled with their teeth. Stories about creatures who could run forever and never tired. And now one of those monsters was right in front of it. Yuna did not move. She stayed very still, her hands at her sides. She breathed slowly and quietly. She made herself as unthreatening as possible. "It is okay," she whispered. She knew the cub probably could not understand her words, but she hoped it could understand her tone. "I will not hurt you. I promise." The cub did not relax. It kept staring at her with those huge glowing eyes. Its small body trembled. Yun, a thought about what to do. She could leave and find help. She could go back to her room and pretend she had not seen anything. That would be the safe choice. The smart choice, but she could not do it. She could not leave a child alone in the dark. She reached into her pocket and found a ration bar. It was human food, a simple mix of protein and grain. She did not know if a Lunari could eat it, but she had nothing else to offer. She broke the bar in half and held out her hand. The cub stared at the food. Its nose twitched, smelling the strange scent. It looked at Yuna's face, then back at her hand. It was clearly hungry. Its body was thin under its fur. It probably had not eaten in days, but it was also terrified. Every instinct in its small body was screaming at it to run, to hide, to get away from the monster. Yuna did not push. She did not move closer. She simply held out her hand and waited till minutes passed. The cargo bay was silent, except for the hum of the station's machines. Yuna's arm began to ache, but she did not lower it. The cub made a small sound, a quiet chirp. It took one step forward. Then it stopped, frozen again by fear. Yuna smiled at it. Not a big smile, just a small, gentle curve of her lips. She kept her teeth hidden. She did not want to scare it more. It is okay, she said again. I am a friend. The cub took another step. Then another. It moved so slowly that Yuna could barely see it moving at all. But it was getting closer. Finally, after what felt like hours, the cub reached her hand. Its small paw touched her fingers. Its fur was soft and warm. It looked up at her one more time, searching her face for any sign of danger. Then it took the food. The cub ate quickly, desperately. It stuffed the ration bar into its mouth like it had not eaten in forever. Crumbs fell onto the floor. Small sounds of relief came from its throat. Yuna felt tears in her eyes. This child was so hungry, so alone, and so afraid. When the food was gone, the cub looked at her hand again. It was empty now. But instead of running away, the cub stepped closer. It pressed its small body against Yuna's leg, seeking warmth. Yuna's breath caught in her throat. The child was trusting her. Despite everything it had heard, despite all its fear, it was trusting her. She slowly reached down and touched its head. The fur was soft between her fingers. The cub made a small purring sound and closed its eyes. Neither of them knew that a security drone was watching from the shadows. Neither of them knew that this moment was being recorded. And neither of them knew that by morning, everything would be different. For now, there was only the darkness of the cargo bay, the warmth of a small body against her leg, and the quiet sound of a child finally feeling safe. Yuna stayed with the cub all night. She did not move. She did not leave. She simply sat in the dust and held the tiny creature until the station's lights began to brighten with artificial dawn. She had come to Veltenine to build bridges between worlds. She had not expected to find a broken child hiding in the shadows, but now that she had found it, she would not let go. When the human entered, everyone expected death, but the cub consumed from her hands. Part 3. The morning came slowly on Veltenine. The station's lights grew brighter by small degrees, imitating the sunrise of a planet that was very far away. Beings woke up in their homes and prepared for another day. Shops began to open. The corridors filled with the sounds of life. But in the council chamber, there was chaos. Ambassador Rail stood before a large screen, his 4 eyes fixed on an image that made no sense to him. The other council members gathered around him, whispering and pointing. Some of them looked confused. Others looked angry. A few looked like they did not know what to feel at all. The image on the screen was from a security drone. It showed the old cargo bay that everyone had forgotten about. And in that cargo bay, lit by dim emergency lights, was something impossible. A human was sitting on the floor. Her uniform was covered in dust. Her hair was messy, and in her arms was a Lunari cub, small and gray and peaceful. The child was sleeping against the human's chest, its tiny paws curled against her body. The human was stroking its fur gently, carefully, like she was afraid of breaking it. "This cannot be real," said Delegate Oren. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep distress. "It must be a trick, some kind of manipulation." "The footage is verified," said the station's security chief. "It was recorded 3 hours ago. The human female left her quarters during the night cycle. She found the cub in the cargo bay. She has been with it ever since. But why? Asked another delegate. Why would a predator care for prey? What purpose does it serve? Nobody had an answer. Rael stared at the screen. He had spent his entire career studying humans. He had read every report, every analysis, every warning. He knew their history. He knew their biology. He knew that they were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. And yet here was one of them, sitting in the dirt, holding an orphan child with the tenderness of a mother. We need to find out who this cub is, Rael said finally. Check the missing persons records. Someone must be looking for it. The security chief nodded and left to begin the search. Rael continued to watch the screen. The human had not moved in hours. She must be tired. Her muscles must be aching. But she stayed perfectly still, keeping the cub comfortable. Why? The question burned in his mind. Why would she do this? Meanwhile, in the cargo bay, Una was thinking about nothing at all. She had entered a peaceful state, a quiet place in her mind where there was only the warmth of the child in her arms and the steady rhythm of its breathing. The cub had woken up once during the night. It had looked at her with frightened eyes, as if it had forgotten where it was. But Una had hummed a soft song, a lullaby her mother used to sing to her, and the cub had relaxed again. It had pressed its face against her chest and gone back to sleep. Una did not know how long she had been sitting there. She did not care. She would stay as long as the child needed her. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Heavy footsteps, many of them. Una looked up and saw a group of Lunari soldiers entering the cargo bay. Behind them was Ambassador Rael, his gray fur standing on end. The soldiers raised their weapons and pointed them at Una. Do not move, one of them commanded. Put down the child and step away. The cub woke up instantly. It felt the tension in the air and began to whimper. Its small claws gripped Una's uniform, holding on tight. Una did not move. She did not raise her hands. She did not try to run. She simply looked at the soldiers with calm eyes. Please, do not scare it, she said softly. The child has been through enough. Rael stepped forward. His eyes were fixed on the cub. Where did you find it? What have you done to it? I found it here, Una replied. Alone, hungry, afraid. I gave it food and stayed with it. That is all. Humans do not care for other species, Rael said. You are predators. You consume. You destroy. This must be some kind of trap. Una looked at him sadly. Is that really what you believe about us? It is what we know. The cub whimpered again. It buried its face in Una's chest, trying to hide from the soldiers and their weapons. Its small body was shaking. Una spoke quietly to it, words that nobody else could hear. The cub's shaking slowed down. Its grip on her uniform loosened slightly. Rael watched this with wide eyes. The human was comforting the child. She was calming its fear. She was doing exactly what a Lunari parent would do. Sir, said the security chief, entering the cargo bay. He carried a datapad in his hands. We found the records. The cub's name is Ren. Its parents were merchants who died in a transport accident 3 weeks ago. It has no other family. It was placed in a temporary shelter, but it ran away. Nobody knew where it went. 3 weeks? Una said, horror in her voice. This child has been alone for 3 weeks? Rael felt shame wash over him. His station. His responsibility. And a child had been suffering in the shadows while everyone went about their daily lives. Why did nobody look for it? Una asked. Her voice was still gentle, but there was something harder underneath. Something that sounded like anger. We did not know, Rael said. The shelter reported it missing, but we assumed it would be found. We assumed someone would take care of it. You assumed. Yuna looked down at the cub. At Ren, she held it closer. This child was starving, alone, terrified, and you assumed. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Their weapons lowered slightly. Rail did not know what to say. He had been so worried about the dangerous humans on his station that he had forgotten about the helpless child hiding in its corners. He had been so focused on protecting his people from monsters that he had not noticed the small creature who needed protection most of all. Yuna stood up slowly, carefully. Ren clung to her, refusing to let go. She faced the soldiers without fear. "I am going to take this child back to my quarters," she said. "I am going to feed it and clean it and make sure it is safe. You can point your weapons at me if you want. You can lock me away. But I will not leave this child alone again." The soldiers looked at Rail, waiting for orders. Rail looked at Yuna, at the cub in her arms, at the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, and he made a decision that would change everything. "Lower your weapons," he said quietly. "Let her go." The soldiers obeyed, confusion clear on their faces. Yuna walked past them without a word. Ren peeked out from her arms and looked at the soldiers with curious eyes. It was no longer shaking. It felt safe. Rail watched them leave. His mind was full of questions. Everything he knew about humans told him that this was wrong, that it was impossible, that predators did not care for the young of other species. But he had just seen it happen with his own eyes. He thought about the look on Yuna's face when she learned that Ren had been alone for 3 weeks. It was not the face of a monster. It was the face of someone who cared. Maybe, Rail thought, the galaxy had been wrong about humans. Maybe they had been wrong about everything. The footage of the cargo bay had already spread across the station. By noon, it would reach the other settlements. By evening, it would be on every news channel in the sector. The galaxy was about to learn something new about the creatures from the death world called Earth. They were about to learn that humans could love. When the human entered, everyone expected death. But the cub consumed from her hands Part 4. The council chamber had never been so full. Every seat was taken. Beings stood along the walls and crowded in the doorways. Representatives from species that had not spoken to each other in years now stood side by side, united by confusion and curiosity. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone had questions. Ambassador Rail stood at the center of the room, feeling the weight of 100 eyes upon him. The screen behind him showed the same image that had been playing on every device across the station. Yuna, the human, holding the Lunari cub named Ren, feeding it from her hand, comforting it in the darkness. "This council has been called to discuss the human situation," Rail announced. His voice was tired. He had not slept in 2 days. "We must decide what this means and what we should do about it." Delegate On was the first to speak. His insectoid body clicked and hummed with agitation. "The footage proves nothing. Humans are known for their deception. This could be a performance designed to lower our guard." "To what end?" asked another delegate. "What would they gain from pretending to care for an orphan?" "Trust," Oren replied. "Access. Once we believe they are harmless, they can move freely among us. Then they strike." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many beings nodded in agreement. The fear of humans was deeply rooted. It would not fade because of one video, but others were not so sure. "I have studied human behavior for 30 years, said a scientist from the Morith delegation. Her voice bubbled through the speaker on her water-filled suit. "I have never seen evidence of this kind of long-term deception. Humans are many things, but they are not patient manipulators. They act on emotion. They respond to immediate situations. What we saw in that footage was genuine." "How can you be certain?" Oren demanded. "Because of the child's response," the scientist replied. "Young beings are sensitive to danger. They can feel when something is wrong. That cub was terrified of everything on this station. It had been hiding for weeks, afraid to show itself. But it went to the human. It ate from her hand. It slept in her arms. Children do not trust monsters. The room fell silent. Everyone thought about the small gray cub pressing itself against the human's chest. Everyone remembered how peaceful it had looked. Rael cleared his throat. I propose we call the humans to testify. Let them explain themselves. Let us hear their words and judge for ourselves. The council agreed. An hour later, Tay stood before them. The human male was tall and broad-shouldered. His face was calm, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the assembled delegates without fear. If he was intimidated by the 100 hostile eyes watching him, he did not show it. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," he said. His voice was deep and steady. "I know you have many questions. I will answer them honestly." Delegate Owen leaned forward. "Why did your colleague approach the cub? What was her purpose?" "She heard it crying," Tay replied simply. "She followed the sound. When she found a child alone and afraid, she tried to help. There was no other purpose. Humans do not help other species," Oren said. "You are predators. You eat meat. You hunt. Why would you care about a being that is not your own kind?" Tay was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Do you know what makes humans different from other predators on our world?" he asked. "It is not our speed or our strength. It is not our weapons or our tools. It is our ability to form bonds." He looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as he could. On Earth, humans have lived with other species for thousands of years. We keep animals in our homes. We feed them and care for them and love them. Dogs, cats, horses, birds, they are not our food. They are our companions, our friends, our family. The delegates whispered among themselves. This was not in any of the reports. None of the warnings mentioned this. "We form bonds with anything that shows us trust," Tay continued. "It is part of our nature. When we see something small and helpless, our instinct is not to attack. Our instinct is to protect. We cannot help it. It is built into our biology." "Then why do humans fight so many wars?" Oren asked. "Why do you have such a violent history?" "Because we also protect what we love with great ferocity," Tay said. "When something threatens our families, our homes, our children, we become dangerous. Yes, we are capable of terrible violence. But that violence comes from love, not hate. We fight because we care too much, not because we care too little." Rael listened to these words carefully. They matched what he had seen in the cargo bay. Una had not been aggressive. She had not demanded anything. But when she spoke about Ren being alone for 3 weeks, there had been fire in her eyes. A quiet fury at the injustice of it. She would have fought anyone who tried to hurt that child. Rael was certain of it. "Where is the cub now?" asked a delegate from the Yanari species. "With Una," Tay replied. "In our quarters. She was fed it and bathed it and put it to sleep in a warm bed. She has not left its side since she found it." "And what are her intentions? Will she give the child back?" Tay hesitated. "That is not my decision to make. But I believe Una will do whatever is best for Ren. If returning it to your people is what the child needs, she will do it. But she will not abandon it. She will not leave it to suffer alone again." The council debated for hours. Some delegates wanted to take Ren back immediately. Others wanted to let Una continue caring for it. A few suggested that the whole situation was still too dangerous to trust. In the end, they decided to wait and watch. They would observe the human and the cub. They would see how Una treated the child over the coming days. And then they would make a final decision. Rael was relieved. He needed time to think. Time to understand what was happening. That evening, he went to the human quarters alone. He did not bring guards or weapons. He simply walked to the door and knocked. Yuna opened it. She looked tired but calm. Behind her, Rael could see Ren sleeping on a soft blanket. The cub's fur had been cleaned. It looked healthier already. "Ambassador," Yuna said, "please come in." Rael entered slowly. He kept his distance from the sleeping child, not wanting to wake it. "I came to understand," he said quietly. "I have spent my life teaching others to fear your kind. I wrote reports. I gave warnings. I believed everything I said. But now I am not sure." Yuna sat down on a chair and looked at him with tired eyes. "We are not what you think," she said. "Or maybe we are exactly what you think, but there is more to us. Yes, we are dangerous. Yes, we come from a harsh world. Yes, we have done terrible things. But we have also done beautiful things. We have loved and sacrificed and protected." She looked at Ren. "When I found that child, I did not see an alien. I did not see prey. I saw a baby, alone and scared and hungry, and every part of me wanted to help it. Not because of politics or strategy, because that is who I am. That is who we are." Rael looked at the sleeping cub. It was so small, so fragile. "I think I understand," he said softly. "I hope so," Yuna replied, "because there are billions of us, and we want to be your friends, not your enemies. But we cannot change what we are. We can only show you who we choose to be." Rael left the human quarters with his mind full of new thoughts. He did not have all the answers yet, but for the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had been wrong. When the human entered, everyone expected death, but the cub consumed from her hands part 5 3 weeks passed on Veltanine. And the station was transformed. At first, the changes were small. A merchant who had hidden from the humans peeked out of his shop and watched Yuna walk by with Ren in her arms. The cub was laughing, making happy chirping sounds as Yuna tickled its belly. The merchant stared for a long moment, then slowly returned to his work. Then more changes came. Children began to appear in the corridors again. They would peek around corners and watch the strange human from a safe distance. Some of them waved. A few were brave enough to approach. Yuna always smiled at them. She would crouch down to their level and speak softly. She would show them Ren, who had become fat and healthy under her care. The children would touch the cub's fur with curious fingers, then run away giggling. The fear was fading. Not completely, not for everyone. But it was fading. The trade negotiations resumed, but they were different now. When Yuna entered the council chamber, the delegates did not flinch. When Tay spoke about human technology and resources, they actually listened. The conversations were still careful, still cautious. But they were no longer filled with terror. Ambassador Rael led most of the discussions. He had changed, too. The way he looked at humans was different now. There was still wariness in his eyes, but also curiosity, and something that might have been respect. One morning, he came to Yuna with news. "The Lunari government has made a decision about Ren," he said. Yuna's face went still. She held the cup closer. "What decision?" Rael saw the protectiveness in her posture, the way her body shifted, ready to defend the child, ready to fight if necessary. He smiled. It was a strange expression on a Lunari face, but Yuna understood it. "They've decided to allow you to keep caring for Ren," Rael said. "Permanently, if you wish. The child is bonded with you. Separating you would cause it great pain, and..." He paused. "And we have come to believe that you will take good care of it." Yuna's eyes filled with tears. She looked down at Ren, who was playing with a button on her uniform, completely unaware of what was being discussed. "Thank you," she whispered. Thank you so much. There are conditions, Rael added. You must bring Ren to visit the Lunari homeworld regularly. The child must learn about its own culture and history. And you must allow our scientists to study your interactions. We want to understand how this bond formed. We want to learn. Yuna nodded eagerly. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. Rael watched her hold the cub. He thought about everything he had believed about humans. Everything he had taught others to believe. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I called your people monsters. I warned everyone to fear you. I was certain you would bring death and destruction to my station. And now? Yuna asked. Rael considered the question carefully. Now, I think the truth is more complicated. You are dangerous. That has not changed. But you are also kind. You are protective. You form bonds that cross species and cultures. You take in orphans who are not your own and love them as if they were. He shook his head slowly. I do not fully understand you. I am not sure I ever will. But I no longer fear you. At least, not the way I used to. The day came when the human ship had to leave. The trade agreement was signed. New relationships had been formed. It was time for Yuna and her crew to return home. The docking bay was crowded. This time, beings did not flee from the humans. They came to watch them leave. Some of them even came to say goodbye. A group of Lunari children stood near the airlock. They had become friends with Ren over the past weeks. They chirped and waved and made sad sounds. Ren chirped back, clutching Yuna's uniform. The cub understood that it was leaving. It looked at its friends with big, glowing eyes. Yuna knelt down so Ren could say goodbye properly. The children came forward one by one. They touched Ren's fur and whispered words in their own language. Promises to stay friends. Promises to visit someday. Then Ambassador Rael stepped forward. He stood before Yuna and looked at her for a long moment. When you arrived, he said, I expected death. I expected violence and fear and destruction. Instead, you showed us something we had never seen before. He reached out and touched Ren's head gently. The cub purred. You showed us that the most dangerous species in the galaxy can also be the most loving. You showed us that strength and gentleness can exist in the same heart. You showed us that we were wrong. He looked into Yuna's eyes. I will spend the rest of my career correcting my mistakes. I will tell everyone what I learned here. I will teach them that humans are not just predators. They are protectors. They are guardians. They take the small and helpless, and they make them strong. He bowed deeply, a gesture his species reserved for those they deeply respected. Thank you, Yuna of Earth. Thank you for showing us the truth. Yuna returned the bow. Thank you for being willing to see it. She turned and walked toward the airlock. Tay and Hannah followed behind her. Ren looked over his shoulder at the crowd, chirping one last goodbye. The airlock closed. The ship began to power up. Through the windows, the beings of Veltanine could see the human vessel slowly pulling away from the station. In the crowd, a young Veth child tugged on its parent's leg. Will the humans come back? It asked. The parent looked at the departing ship. Once, it would have been relieved to see the humans leave. Once, it would have hoped they never returned. But now? Yes, the parent said. I think they will. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel and disappeared among the stars. Aboard the vessel, Yuna sat in her quarters with Ren on her lap. The cub was tired from all the goodbyes. Its eyes were slowly closing. Yuna stroked its fur and hummed the same lullaby she had sung in the cargo bay. The song her mother had sung to her when she was small and afraid. She thought about everything that had happened. She had come to Veltanine as a diplomat. She was leaving as a mother. It was strange how life worked sometimes. Strange and wonderful. Ren fell asleep in her arms, purring softly. Yuna looked out the window at the stars streaming past. Somewhere out there was Earth, her home, her family. And now she was bringing a new member to join them. She wondered what her parents would think of their alien grandchild. She smiled at the thought. They would probably spoil Ren completely. The galaxy was still full of fear and misunderstanding. There were still species who would never trust humans. There were still wars to fight and problems to solve. But something had changed. A small crack had formed in the wall of fear. Light was shining through. One human. One cub. One moment of kindness in a forgotten cargo bay. It was just the beginning. But every journey starts with a single step. Every change starts with a single act. And sometimes, all it takes to transform a galaxy is a hand extended in the darkness. Offering food to a hungry child, Yuna closed her eyes and held Ren close. The stars kept streaming past, and somewhere on Veltanine, Ambassador Rail began writing a new report. This time, it was not a warning about the dangers of humans. It was an invitation. The end.